We'll spend the bulk of the time on questions and responses. We do intend to have some closure at 7:30 as advertised, but many of the staff will stay online and will continue to answer questions. So you don't need to worry if there's a lot of people with a lot of questions, because we'll stay to get through them beyond 7:30. Next slide, please. The people who are here, so you know what the resources are for the question and answer period. From county staff is Dr. Marilyn Underwood. She is the Director of Environmental Health. Her office is managing the debris removal program, and also septic, water, and sanitation aspects of the building permit process. There are staff from the County Administrative Office and the new County Office of Emergency Response, Recovery, and Resiliency. Carolyn Burke, the Senior Civil Engineer with the Planning Department, is here, and she's a resource for permit-related technical topics, such as geologic hazards and geotechnical issues. And then we'll be introducing the RPC staff, and that is Michael Renner and Marcus Johnson. And they are here. Their firm is Four Leaf, and that is the firm we have contracted with to set up and staff the Recovery Permit Center. But it's really important to know that the Recovery Permit Center and the county are one thing. They come from another firm, but we all are pulling in the same direction. We have Kendra Boyer, who is the branch director for California OES. She's able to represent for the public debris removal topic, as well as Dr. Underwood. Then we have invited the fire chiefs, who each have some authority in the burn area. So we have, I see that Chief Larkin from County Fire is online. We also invited Deputy Chief Chris Walters, Chief Mark Bingham from Boulder Creek, and Chief Stacy Haynes from Ben Lomond. And then lastly, we reached out to representatives of the water suppliers in the burn area in case you have any specific questions that they can best answer. Next slide, please. So the key aspects of the Recovery Permit Center are that they're dedicated only to this activity. You will be dealing with staff people who don't have a bunch of other things to be focusing on. It's a one-stop coordinated service. If you have ever applied for a building permit, you know that there's a layer of coordination that has to happen among different agencies and departments. And in this case, your interaction will be just with the Recovery Permit Center. You'll get to know those staff people, and they will be doing the coordinating behind the scenes so that you do not have to. Streamlining is clearly the goal, and the one-stop nature is a part of that, but also a key part of it is a focus on the pre-application part of the process. Experience shows that you get to have the real streamlining, the fast review and return when a complete application is submitted at the beginning. So the orientation here is to work with you through any problem areas so that we can help you come in with that complete package so that you can have that streamlined experience. The way we're going to do that is through a series of clearances where we'll work with you on each of the areas that tend to be the ones that get complicated. That would be environmental health, septic related issues, potential geologic hazards, and fire access. So we will work with you to get solutions there at the front end so that your permit process is that much more smooth. When you have a complete application, you can expect a first review within about 7 working days, which is pretty good. And so lastly, the services are COVID safe. We've made the transition to being remote. So the pre-consultations and the questions have been done in remote video meetings. And it seems like property owners are taking to that really well. Screens can be shared, and there's a real back and forth that happens, and the specifics of your parcel can be looked at that time. And in a way, I think it's actually feeling better to many people than being in a crowded room with a lot of other people at a counter. If a video appointment doesn't work for you, we will find another way to interact with you. So just call us and we'll talk about that. So those are our goals, and I want everyone to know that each of the staff people are committed to making these goals happen. And with that, I think we'll turn it over to Dr. Underwood to talk about the debris removal program. Thank you.
Thank you, Paya. Good evening. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes catching us up on where we are with the debris removal. And again, these are steps that have to happen before a permit can be issued for you. But just to reemphasize, the Recovery Permit Center is available for people to come start talking already and get a lot of information and get progress made even before the debris removal clearance occurs. So just wanted to emphasize that. So out of the properties that were burned that had structures on them, we've gotten 676 applications for the right of entry for the government program and 206 applications for private contractor. We do have a few parcels we're still trying to get into the program. We hope to complete that this month. You can follow the progress of the government program via a link that is on this very nice, I don't know if Paya has talked about it yet, our nice new website. There's a nice link to the progress of the state cleanup system, and I think Melody is going to unshare. She has to do a little gyrations here. She has to unshare this the PowerPoint and then reshare the screen, but hold on. And this allows you to see the different steps from the place where the property is in their program, and you can see that you're engaged in the program, to the debris removal has occurred. Well, actually, even steps before that. Asbestos sampling has to take place, site assessment has to take place, you get to the debris removal. And so on this, if you wouldn't mind, Melody, choosing Santa Cruz County up there in the filter by county, so we can see where we're at. This is actually one that shows the entire state. And you can see here that they have 664 applications that they've received of ROEs, and they're already at 284 debris removals complete. Once the debris is removed, there still has to be soil samplings. They compare the soil sampling results compared to background and health comparison values. If they come out fine, no rescraping is needed, then you can see that we're at the point where I have 83 soil samples, parcels have had soil samples approved. What are the next steps after that? Erosion control, and erosion control from a minimum of where they put on a hydro mulch, and it'll look green. If those of you have seen it already, it's put on in the area that they disturb, so that they make sure the sediment does not go down the next storm we have, go down into our waterways. They will also add wattles and other types of erosion control depending upon your slope. But again, their primary purpose is to control the runoff from the disturbed area, not from your entire parcel, but from the disturbed area. Once erosion control occurs, you may or may not have hazardous trees that have been marked. Those are marked with a blue number and a tag. And the reason why those were marked is because in the next 5 years, it's by an arborist, they predict it could fall, and it would fall on a public road or a road used for public purposes. And therefore they would be part of the hazardous tree removal program. Not every parcel has a hazardous tree marked. Once erosion control and hazardous trees are done, then they will give a final sign off, and we will be sent that documentation. I did receive documentation for one property, and it has been signed off and given a clearance. I will say it's the first property in the entire state that was given a final sign off, but you can see that we also anticipate very soon the 83 parcels that have had soil samples already conducted and approved. Those should be moving through the erosion control and hazardous tree removal quickly as well. So this is really in a process already. You can see they've had about 40% of the parcels have had debris removal. So we're well on the way. This is getting moving, and they will be predicted to be done by the end of April. So for that, and just to say on this map, you can look right below the Santa Cruz, if you can point that out, Melody, right below the Santa Cruz, where Santa Cruz is picked, there's a little thing that looks like a microscope or something. That's where you can type in your address. It's not necessarily obvious if you want to see where your parcel progress is, and then you compare it to the key on the right-hand side and the color. That tells you where your parcel is in the progress of the state program. Now moving back to the PowerPoint slides. Again, I said that one of the state contractors' parcels have been released. We have had 33 parcels released through the private contractor. And so progress is definitely being made there. Again, you can also view with the progress on both private and public by viewing that Next Access website that I'm showing you. Once both of these are done, again, we urge you to continue to start getting connection with the Recovery Permit Center. You don't have to wait, but certainly as soon as you get a clearance, you need to have a clearance to do a rebuild. You need a clearance to do temporary housing, but you don't need a clearance to start talking with the Recovery Permit Center. And I don't know if so this is the dashboard for the county's dashboard showing the progress through both the private, as you see on the right-hand side, 33 properties have been cleared on the private contractor side and 1 on the state. But again, I anticipate many more being cleared on the state very, very soon. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Renner. He's one of the people in charge from Four Leaf, and we're happy to have them in our county and help us out with this permitting process.
Hi, Dr. Underwood. Thank you. First, I just want to say, my heart goes out to you all. We're happy you're here to get this information. This is just one of many interactions we're going to have. So to echo what Paya had said, what Dr. Underwood has said, and what Ms. Serino has said, we can't see you enough. Call these phone numbers all the time. Ask any questions you want to ask. There are no stupid questions. We want to answer the question 100 times if we have to. So just a little quick background. This slide will also be up at the end. This is, I'm Mike Renner. I'm the Director of Development Recovery Services for Four Leaf. Marcus Johnson there in conjunction with me. Those are our cell phone numbers, our personal and work cell phone numbers. Those phones are on 24 hours a day, all the time. That's the commitment we've made to the county. You can call us at any time for any reason. It's not something we boast about, but we do have a lot of development recovery experience. We run the entire full program in Sonoma County. We also run the entire rebuild program in the town of Paradise, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. This is nothing new for us. It's certainly a vertical we wish we could get rid of, but it's something that we know how to do. So I want to, I know you're going to get a lot of information tonight. We don't expect you to keep all this information in your head. Ask a lot of questions. Staff will be here. These phone numbers you can text, you can email. We're here for you. Marcus, in conjunction with me, has also he's ran Sonoma with me, Paradise as well, and we've also done the same type of work in Calaveras County, Ventura County, City of Malibu. So I want everyone to kind of take a collective breath. You're in good hands. We're going to make sure you're taken care of. I know it's overwhelming. Even a lot of the information you're going to hear on this meeting is overwhelming. So we'll get through the next couple slides as quick as we can because, at the end of the day, we're here for you, and we want to answer as many questions as we can. So next slide, please. So these are the first steps on the rebuild process. One is a pre-application meeting. We like to call them PAS, P-A-S, pre-application screening. So don't let the screening word sound funny in this strange time we're in, but that's when you just come in at any step you are in the process, wherever you are. If you want to talk to us and you have a napkin that you drew some sketches on and you want to talk about that, come in and talk to us. And forgive me, I'll keep saying come in because I'm not used to this COVID environment yet, but set a meeting for a pre-app and we'll get together that way. If you're at the point where you have a designer, a contractor, you're ready to go with your design, you're at step Z, not step A, have the pre-app meeting. I can't reinforce that enough. It's a couple hours that at times, a half hour at times, we sit down together. We go through your APN, we go through your project. We learn about any potential hiccups, and we get through them together. After that, we'll go into the clearance process, which Haya touched on. So on the clearance side, we're going to look at geological, fire, and environmental health clearances. We're going to get those in place prior to plan submittal for building plan check. That way, all our ducks are in a row. You're ready to go, and we can promise and guarantee that, you know, very aggressive turnaround time to look at your plans and get you that permit and get you building ASAP. From there, we have, like I just talked about, permit submittal. Sorry, something keeps popping up on the screen, admitting people. And then permit issuance. And I know we're making that sound really simple, and that's what we want it to be. We want it to be as simple as possible. We want it to be as painless as possible. We want to get you back in your homes. So, you know, if there's anything on the property that you maybe it's something you don't want to disclose to the county, you don't want things to be found out, come talk to us about it. We're not here to get you. We're not the police. We want to make sure you can rebuild and be whole. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide, and I will let Mr. Johnson introduce himself.
Good evening. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us this evening. I'm going to go over the steps a little bit more in depth than Mike did. So one of them is the pre-application screening. What we want to see, we just want to talk to you. We want to know what you're thinking, what you want, what an insurance company is asking for. Just kind of opening up the possibilities to your property, not just thinking you have to build exactly what was there. You might, at that time, you might want to move it. You might want to, you would throw some ideas at us, and we can give you the permitting, how that's going to affect your permitting, either if it's going to add any type of permitting, or if there's an easier way to do it. That's what those pre-application meetings are going to be mainly about. But a lot of times it's just to kind of shoot the breeze and just kind of give us some information of what you're looking for, where you're looking to be. It's a lot simpler to kind of give us, like Mike said, we're not the police, we're not going to try to get you, but just kind of full disclosure. You don't want to get further on down the road and have like a gotcha moment or anything like that. It's easy to kind of just work out everything that's available to your property, and we can really guide you as far as how to get to that final goal of rebuild, of exactly kind of what you want to rebuild. Go to the next slide, please. So the second kind of the second phase is this pre-clearances. There's geological hazards, there's fire access, and there's environmental health. What we're looking for at this time is we're in a spot now where we're developing a little out of order. We're trying to put back either something that's different or something that was built maybe a while back that we need to fit back within the parameters that the infrastructure was there, or the portions that you want to save or reuse on your property. So that's what the biggest need of the pre-clearance is. With that, you'll either get kind of a conditions of approval of maybe what will be required to get to the final steps of getting your permit issued. And that's maybe you need a geological assessment, some further investigation, or maybe, you know what, your septic system isn't as suitable for the house you're looking to build. So here's the requirements of what would need to get to that next step. Same thing with fire access. Maybe we're moving the house to the other side of the property and helping take the existing infrastructure and make it up to par to have it moved to maybe a better location with a better view. Next slide, please. So geological clearance is one of the first ones. Basically, it's we'll need a site plan it's the same site plan for all three clearances. It asks for a little bit more information, but we've kind of made it where we're looking for kind of basic information, siting of where the existing structure was versus where the new structure where some roads are at, maybe a high point on the property, so kind of how things are free flowing, where the septic wells kind of are situated. And that helps us determine on a geological standpoint if there was any hazards that would affect that particular build site or any mitigations that may be needed to either be put back in place or be added for moving or resiting the particular build site. Next slide, please. So the environmental clearance, is for verifying the size of the system to what you're proposing on rebuilding. And over time, we've had just on some of the pre-clearances we've seen there, people want either a bigger house or tweak their floor plan, and just trying to help get the best configuration to meet what they want. Not everybody necessarily thinks about their septic system in a way that, hey, it never backed up on me, it's working fine. Well, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, so it's kind of getting that to the forefront. You don't want to put necessarily a brand new house and then have problems with the 40, 50, 60-year-old septic system. So that's one thing of making sure that the ultimate load can accommodate what the future rebuild is, on top of kind of maximizing the properties. We've seen people that they want to do an ADU, JDUs, add barns with restrooms, and just kind of getting what's required to do that, the ultimate load, and knowing what you're going to be kind of looking towards in a septic environment. The second part is verifying the potable water source and making sure that it's still a viable water source. So we'll be looking up records, making sure that if you do decide to do a new septic system or have to do a new septic system, we still have all the correct setbacks, and that it is a potable system that you can continue to use, especially after the fire, where some people have had some issues melting components and whatnot, and just to make sure that that water system is potable for future. Next slide. And then the final pre-clearance is fire, and kind of what I talked about earlier, verifying that the fire access meets the fire code, making sure we have brush locked back, we don't have gate problems, just kind of everything that the fire department needs to get there and help in an emergency and in a medical emergency is really what we're talking about. If the house gets resited, as far as in a new spot, how to get access to those particular areas and get a fire truck and emergency vehicles up there and back. We also talk about siting possible hydrants, turnouts, tank locations. That's all kind of that pre-clearance as far as setting that up. And what that happens is we send a representative out. They go out there with that particular site plan, and they kind of make a conditions of approval, and all these would be incorporated into your ultimate build, your rebuild package. So your site plan would change a little bit to incorporate these things, and in some instances you may need to get a separate permit, but at least at this time there's a kind of an all-in-one letter created that lets you know what conditions may be required, or that, hey, everything's great, you're building something like for like, close to like for like, it works in what was originally constructed, and it's just a kind of approval letter at that point.
I wanted to add something, Marcus, to the fire pre-clearance. Just I know that was a lot of information. I know I'm just feeling for everybody. We're throwing a lot of information, so I wanted to let folks know that the individuals we have out in the field performing the fire pre-clearances are they're longtime Santa Cruz County residents and employees. We have Kevin McClish, past fire chief, also Ron Gressinger, who was instrumental in actually writing some of the fire codes. And then we do have all the chiefs online here. The Recovery Permit Center, we're going to make recommendations to the fire district, and ultimately the recommendations will be accepted or denied by the fire district. So I did want folks to understand that there's very well be situations where we need to interface directly with the fire district. And I can tell you that, I personally have worked with all the ladies and gentlemen, and their goal is the same, is to get you back in your home and make sure you're safe when you're there. So thanks, Marcus.
No problem. Next slide, please. So after this, the project submittal, and this is where we get kind of a collaboration of everything that we've done ahead of time. And it's really just pre-planning from the pre-application or the pre-screening meetings all the way to the project submittals. Is we can't see you enough. There's going to be a lot of information delved out. Most of the time in the pre-application, early on in the pre-application, I might see people 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Just because one week the goal is septic, next week the goal is trying to figure out what are my WUI options, and the next goal is to figure out just kind of there's a lot of stuff going out, and I feel for you, and we can take that. It's a lot. A pre-application meeting from start to finish could easily be a few hours of just giving you all the information, but it's nice to piece it out. You can speak to the same representative at the RPC we can create relationships at that point where you got their numbers, their cell phones, and you can continue to talk to them. But coming through the process, it's kind of taking that whole information and bit and piecing it into one massive submittal. And what that helps us do is when you get to the building side of it, we've pretty much taken all the guesswork out of anything that would be required previously, and we'd have everything ready to go as far as for the application. When you submit the application, we have your whole building submittal. If there was any other permits needed, maybe a Knox box application for a gate or a certificate from a pumping within the last month or something, whatever what was required, we know at that time what is needed, and we can do that review and consolidate all that to get you that review within 7 days. We also have with the building submittal is we call it a green line process, and what basically that does is it takes any kind of minor comments that either the codes or there's kind of black and white, and we add it to the plans, annotate it for the designer or the homeowners. Instead of writing a comment letter and having plans redrawn up for kind of really no reason, we can get it going back and forth and just saying, hey, we had some comments, here's the comments, they'll be clouded, they'll be in green. Do you accept? Yes. All right, everybody's moving forward at that point. Next slide. So Mike, I got the inspection part for you.
Oh, sorry, I was just listening to you, Marcus. You know so much more than I thought you knew. So on the inspection process, we wanted to again just reinforce to you folks that through the entire process, from day one to the day that you invite Marcus over to your house for a barbecue and a beer because you're finally back in your house, you have that one point of contact. Again, our cell phone numbers are available. They're there all the time. It's our staff, again, performing the inspections. If there's complaints, concerns, it's a phone call away. We want to guide you through that process. And one thing that's great is the idea of creating this one-stop shop, which you come in and you deal with one person. And it's not saying that there's not a lot of background work. There's a whole bunch of background work, but that's done by our staff, and we interface amongst one another and with the terrific county staff as well. And that just results in you just knowing at the end of the day that the cookie tastes good. You don't really watch it get made, and that's a refined process that we have. So on your end, it will be seamless, and it will be as painless as possible. I think probably about there. Next slide.
So this is back to me.
Yep.
And I just want to take you on a quick tour of the fire recovery website. So once again, I'm going to have to unshare and then reshare. So bear with me for a minute. All right, so we've put together a new website for everybody, and it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to find things on. There is some scrolling that you can do to get to some specific things like signing up for Code Red or learning about upcoming events. But the most important thing is that you can see right here at the top the different areas that we can speak to. So debris flow is going to answer some questions about debris flow that we had the town halls on last week. Debris removal is everything that Marilyn has talked to you about. So there's different areas here for you to look at debris removal. And again, here's that map on what's happening with this phase 2 process. So easy click, one click through to most things. And as well as the details of information on, you know, what to do. The forms are here, so you can just grab the forms off the website, and they're in a DocuSign, so you can sign it electronically if you need to. Sign something so you don't have to print it out and sign it and then scan it and then send it somewhere. Everything is done very easily through the DocuSign process. And then that recovery and rebuild section, which is the recovery permit section that Mike and Marcus have just been talking to you about. And so all the information that they've talked about, you know, what happens during pre-application, how do you get a temporary housing permit or a temporary power permit, the building permit application. And again, you could be able to click through to some questions, FAQs. You can make your appointment right here, right now, if you want to make an appointment with Marcus and Mike in the Recovery Permit Center. You can go right here and make that happen. And so all of that information is available to you here. You can sign up for the newsletter just by giving us your email address, and we will do newsletters about once a month. We just sent one out recently, last Friday, to introduce the new recovery website and a few other upcoming meetings. And then the resilience piece is really that piece that will come with the overall Office of Response, Recovery, and Resiliency, where we will add information here as we get into this piece of the process. And that's really looking at the fact that there's probably going to be more disasters with climate change. And so really building community capacity to deal with that, as well as looking at policies and procedures that can help us respond to those things. So that's the new website that I wanted to introduce you to. And I'm going to close out of this and come back to the slide presentation. So give me 1 second here. So here's some information again on the Recovery Permit Center, and it is in the basement of the county building. So if you come in the front doors, you're going to want to go down to the basement floor when you get here for your appointment. And again, you can just click here for the fire recovery website to make your appointment. And then Mike and Marcus, their primary contact information. Again, these slides will be posted, so you'll have this information. You don't have to write it down right now. It'll be available to you. And then now we're into the area of the questions. So somehow I lost the presentation. Let me come back to that.
So as Melody is getting that presentation back up, as a reminder for folks who want to ask questions, there's 2 ways that you can do that. And as a reminder, my name is Dave Reed from the OR3 office. You can use the raise your hand function in the upper bar. There's a little hand and you can click on that and that will raise your hand, and then we'll ask you to unmute yourself to ask your question. Or there have been some folks who've already taken advantage of the chat and typing in questions into the chat. And so Marilyn and others from staff have been trying to answer those questions as we've been going along. But this is our opportunity, as Mike and Marcus said, to start asking some questions, and we can do our best to facilitate answering those. So Christine, you are the first hand raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, Christine Harper.
Christine Harper from White House Canyon, north of Davenport. We just had a debris removal done by Anvil, and they destroyed a portion of our road, and none of the rebuild can happen until they fix it, and they have not acknowledged what they've done yet.
Yeah, so Christine, let me answer that real quick. An email should have been sent out to you today from Supervisor Coonerty's office. I was on that thread as well,
Okay.
and there will be a member of the Cal OES damage recovery team reaching out to you hopefully shortly. So check your email. There was an email regarding that.
Great, thank you so much.
Robert Dunn. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. Robert?
Okay, I think I'm online. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I've got a real simple rebuild situation. What I want to do is rebuild my pump house first and bring my electric service to that building, which is small, so it's not permitted, but I need to get approval from PG&E to bring power in to the service entrance. And I understand they're limited to 100 amp service currently, but I'm going to put in a 200 amp service for the eventual, because it'll be the permanent electrical service. How do I go about doing that?
So you'll want to come in. Sorry, you have to forgive me. I can't stop saying come in. So give us a call at the number provided, and that's going to generally, all you're going to be applying for there is a temporary power permit. And if you choose to site that temp power in a way where you can easily turn it to permanent power, absolutely, that's encouraged. That's a great plan.
Oh, great, thanks.
Robin Hilliard. Robin?
Yeah. Hi. How much is this going to cost?
What do you mean by this?
The full permit. What's the
Sorry?
permit going to run? There are a lot of people out here that don't have any money, weren't insured. I just got heard that maybe it was 20 grand for a permit.
So it's the cost of the permit. It depends on a lot of different factors. One
how
is
big the house is and all that other stuff. But
Sure.
how much is a permit going to run?
I have no shot.
Let's say you have a 1,500 square foot house, 2 bedroom, 2 bath. How much would a permit cost for that?
Sure. I think that was actually one of the square footage examples that was used in your board packet, Paya. Do you recall that off the top of your head?
Not off the top, but I'm looking it up right now. We did an example permit calculation for, I think we used a 1,500 square foot in Bonnie Doon. And if you hang on, I'd be very happy to tell you the number that we came up with. But it is very important to realize that this is one of the things that's a little bit site specific. It depends on, whether you need engineering, and it depends on whether your septic needs upgrade, that kind of a thing.
Well, let's just say the septic's fine and the road's okay, the well's okay. How much is for the house?
Robin, let me answer a piece of that just for you and for the larger audience. There are, for those that are insured or underinsured, we do have a group called the Long-Term Recovery Group. That's a collection of nonprofit organizations as well as the United Policyholders organization that helps navigate the insurance part of your recovery. So I recommend
it's not the problem. It's the people without insurance.
I understand, but I also just want to share that resource for folks because it's for everybody's awareness, and we will be publishing that resource and that information on the fire recovery website. But for those of you who are navigating this process, both inside the permit process and outside of it, that's going to be an additional resource for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. And I was able to look that up in the meantime. So just as a general example, The estimated amount of permit fees for a 2,000 square foot in-kind reconstruction, meaning you're building pretty much the same thing you had before. If it doesn't have extra geologic investigation or septic extra construction, the total permit fees would be around $13,000.
13, is that what you said?
Yeah, and that is after the board reduced and waived certain other fees that collectively come to about 25 or 30% of a reduction on the total fees for a permit.
Thank you.
Yeah,
There's
and,
a lot of
I'll put the link to this written report in the chat so that you can, absorb it also on your own time.
There's a lot of people that don't even have the 13. There's some people that they got money from FEMA maybe, and it's maybe just barely enough to put them back into a shed that they were living in.
So there's also, I know in Sonoma County, in Paradise, in Ventura County, there was a lot of nonprofits that came in. Now I know it may not feel like it, but we're early in the recovery process here, especially us and our team being boots on the ground. We're very early. There were a lot of resources, a lot of charitable donations, a lot of state funds that came in, a lot of federal funds that came in. I know the county's actively engaged with looking at different grant monies, et cetera. So, I would advise. I know it's tough. It's a terrible spot. But don't get discouraged. I mean, there's a lot of bright news that happens monetarily through these programs. So, keep your ear to the ground. We're going to be doing more of these meetings. If we get information for different financial resources, I know Mr. Reed and the supervisor's office are going to get that to you via their newsletter. But right now, we want to answer your questions succinctly, directly. If you ask how much it is, we're going to tell you how much it is as of today. We can certainly empathize and understand with what you're saying, that not a lot of folks, there's situations where folks don't have that. This meeting, probably not the best to really delve into that. I think down the road, and I don't mean years down the road, I mean very rapidly, we could see some other financial resources that can help people.
Okay, so there's no way that the county can let some of this go. I'm on Last Chance. Last Chance has quite a few parcels.
Yeah, we've interfaced with a lot of folks from the Last Chance area already.
Robin, let's definitely continue this conversation. We want to make sure we get a chance to hear from a few other folks, but we definitely hear your concerns, and as Mike said, and Paya, we empathize with the situation, and please engage with the Recovery Center as well as some of the other resources. Sign up for the newsletter so that you can be made aware of as many resources that will be made available to everybody. But the next person with their hand raised, Larry. Larry, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of things. I haven't heard anybody mention the word soils in this conversation, and my understanding is to get a temporary permit, you have to do soils and geology.
So what type of temporary permit are you talking about? Just like a temp trailer,
Well, for temporary power, you have to. Okay. Well, let's back up. To get a regular permit, let's not talk about temporary permit. To get a regular permit, I'm under the understanding that you have to do soils and geology. You guys have just been talking about geology. Does that mean we don't have to do soils?
Sure. So the geological hazards that may exist on the property, that's not in line with a geotechnical study. I think that's what we're talking about. If you're talking about bringing the drill rig out, punching the ground, sure. So in a lot of cases, that's how your design professional, or even if you're doing prescriptive type construction, going out and testing the bearing capacity of the soils is how we figure out what type of foundation needs to be built. And I'm not I'm not answering just for you, sir. There's obviously there's 100 or so people on the line, so I'm trying to speak to the entire audience.
That answers my question. But going back to the pump, the guy who had the question about the pump.
Yep.
I have the same situation, and the answer was, well, get a temporary power permit. A temporary power permit is not a trivial thing to get. You have to fill out a form. You have to have the geology. I mean, it's quite in depth just to get power for a pump.
I don't think so.
Am I right?
No, it's not, sir. It's not. No, I mean, a temporary power permit is pretty much an over-the-counter processing. So if you give my folks,
have you looked at the new website? You've got to fill out a bunch of.
I haven't had the.
Okay, you have to have. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have it in front of me right at the minute, but you have to have phase 2 done, and you have to have had geology done, right?
So phase two is definitely suggested to be done. What I'm telling you is there's not a lot of forms. It's a simple. We've done numerous temp powers already. There's no geology involved with the temp power permit. You come in, it's we give you the permit, you engage with the folks where you get your pole set where you want your pole. We come out and inspect, we green tag it for PG&E, and PG&E fires it up.
Okay, that's wonderful.
And if you hear anything different from staff, give me a call, because that's the process.
Fantastic. That when I read it, so I misunderstood. Thank you.
There's just thank you for that. Thanks for clarifying for everybody. There's like I said, there's a lot of information out there, and we're digesting a lot of information. We may have some incorrect information that we need to look at too. So thank you.
Okay.
We'll go to the next question from Junko Holiday. Juco, sorry.
Oh, yes. Hello. The first thing that I wanted to say is to everybody who is a fellow survivor of this, I just wanted to take a deep breath and just acknowledge that this is hard, and just to be really candid about that. And I also just wanted to thank all of the people who are here to help us through this. And thank you for your patience and understanding that there's just an array of emotions that come up, and that this is incredibly, incredibly difficult. So I have 2 questions. The first is about trees that might fall or be a hazard within 5 years. Is there a contact person to have trees reevaluated? Because I just have a question about some of the trees on my parcel is my first question. I'm happy to get that info over email if that's easiest.
On the tree side, I think Mr. Reed might have some insight. And if you're talking, are these trees that you think may be a hazard of falling onto a public way?
They're trees, so I lived up Alba, and they're trees that an arborist from PG&E took a look at, and they are in danger of falling into a fire road that isn't a road that the public road uses, but it's a road that the fire department actually used to get up Truck Trail. It's on Truck Trail into the park to fight the fire. So California has a right of way there on that road, and actually one tree already fell. So if there were another fire, they would be blocking that access. And so from what I understand, a number of the trees that are along that road are dead and dying, is what the arborist said, but they haven't been marked. So I just wondered, is there a way to contact someone to get that reevaluated, or to find out what the deal is with that?
Yeah, why don't I just put my email into the chat? So if you go into the chat, david.reed, R-E-I-D, at santacruzcounty.us, feel free to email me, and we can look into that, and whether that's something CAL FIRE would be taken care of, or PG&E, if it's along a PG&E utility line. So we can look into that for you.
Okay.
And I saw that Marilyn Underwood also. Did you have a response to that, Marilyn?
You know, if David wants to take the lead on this one, I'll let him take the lead on that one. So thank you.
And And then the second question that I have is I might be the only person who actually wants to rebuild smaller, in part because I'm a small business owner and I'm in downtown Ben Lomond. East Mountain Yoga, by the way, I have free memberships for anyone who has a fire survivor. We're offering free yoga. Sorry if that's not allowed. I just did a commercial.
That's okay.
But so I was curious about what the kind of size things are because I was uninsured. My business has been closed due to COVID. I have to really focus on building up my resources in order to be able to afford all of this. And so part of my plan hinges on building something that was smaller than what I had permitted. And I didn't know, I read that there was some talk about allowing an ADU-sized structure to stand as our kind of like primary home without having to build bigger. And then the other question I have is because it's going to take me some time to save money and to get through this, is what is the recovery time limit? So I know it's 3 years if you have a temporary permit for temporary housing, but when is recovery over? Like how long are you going to give us to get through this process, especially for those of us who didn't have insurance and have to kind of pay as we go? Thank you.
Your second question is the tougher one that I'm going to answer the easier one. You can certainly build an ADU size structure. The California Building Code has some restrictions on minimum room sizes for habitability, and it goes down. Marcus can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's somewhere around 640 square feet what it adds up to for all of the room sizes combined. And we can certainly help you out with that. I don't have the code book in front of me, but tiny homes are definitely in the code now. There's a lot of great options out there, and so the answer is yes to that.
Does that mean that 640 square feet is the smallest one can go, or?
I don't want to say it's 640 is the smallest. You can go smaller. I can't quote you the exact number, but if you give me a call tomorrow, or you give our office a call tomorrow, I can give you that.
Perfect.
So this year, this won't be of interest to everyone, but this year is the first year that tiny homes are actually included in the California Building Code. And that takes away a lot of the minimum requirements that are in Chapter 3 of the Building Code, which we've used for years and years. So now there's different egress requirements, different head height requirements. So we have a lot more, I guess we have a lot more latitude in helping you figure out what you can do and go a little smaller and nicer and cozy and what have you.
I just want to say, as a tiny home dweller for 9 years, I'm really excited to hear that, and not to feel like I'm gonna get in trouble for wanting simple.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then the second part, I think Mr. Reed can probably take.
Well, I wanted to give Paya a chance. She raised her hand, and I think she might have some follow-up as well.
Hi, Juco. What I wanted to tell you is that one of the changes that's happened is that you can now build your ADU. Say you were going to build a main house and an ADU. You can build the ADU first. And I think some people will choose to build an ADU, live in that while they, do what it takes to get their main house constructed. And you may never build that larger house, or you might at some point, but that's going to be an option. So you don't necessarily have to think about it as building a smaller house, but think about it as building your ADU first, and then you still have that other potential.
Oh, Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree.
Sorry about that, folks.
Someone needs to mute.
That's all right.
Nice.
That was oddly calming, so wasn't that bad.
I hope that helped answer your questions, Juco, and thank you for the honesty and bravery to share your experience and your feelings at the beginning of that too. Steve, you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question, Steve? Steve, we don't have your last name, so I don't know if there's a Steve that raised their hand. If you raised your hand, otherwise I can go to Christina. Christina, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. So I just want, I've been looking at these forms. There's like 3 of them, right? 3 different forms that have to be filled out: fire safety, environmental, and geo, right? Geological hazards. 3 separate forms, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. There's 3 forms, and what you see as part of is consolidating specific information for specific departments.
Right.
So you'll see there's be environmental, geological, and the fire, and that's just because in the long term they all have different information that they keep tabs on and the way they keep their files.
So I'm looking at these forms, and I mean, it's like I feel like I think my designer is definitely going to help me fill these out, because there's a lot of information on these. I mean,
It asks a lot, but a lot of that information is really at the top. You'll see like the bottom portions is, if you start reading, it's for staff only, but they're connected. So if you, like when you take a pre-application meeting, we can go through the forms, help you complete them. A lot of it is just kind of putting your information, contact information, is really what we're looking for. A lot of that second half of those sheets is for kind of for our back end information to fill out.
okay.
That's
All right. So I just wanted the clarification on those 3 forms, and like, just you get those in as soon as possible, and then you approve them. And then once that's approved, then you can submit your whatever, like your building plan, that kind of thing, basically.
So with those,
we're skipping a super important step, and this is, and I'm glad we get to reiterate it. So thank you. The pre-application meeting, that's the key. That's the key to your rebuild. That's the key to come in and talk to our very knowledgeable folks, like Marcus said, help you fill that out, help you get on the right path for your clearances.
What if you think your designer already did it for you? Like if your designer already met already?
So I recommend when your designer has a pre-application meeting, I recommend strongly that the property owner be involved. So we want you to get that information directly from the horse's mouth. We're not talking in tongues in there. We're talking very, very simple language. So you don't have to be a builder. You don't have to be an engineer. And I'm not saying a designer's trying to keep anything from you or do anything. I'm just trying to say it's a great thing to be there and get the knowledge firsthand if you can. If you can't, and you do have a design professional on board, the design professional should be taking care of these forms for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right. Making an appointment. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm just gonna ask Paya. We missed one question from Juco, and so I wanted to circle back because a few people in the chat have asked that again regarding the duration that this process will be going on. So Paya, did you have a little bit more to add to that question?
I did. That's why I raised my hand.
So
what in most communities, what we see is that sort of the arc of time of the rebuilding is that for the bulk of the rebuilding, it takes about 3 years to do. So everybody, has to get their resources together. And the Recovery Permit Center as a separate entity may not be there, for long into the future. It depends on how the arc of our rebuilding looks. But if there are some people, a smaller number of parcels that haven't been rebuilt at the time that we no longer have a recovery permit center, we will just continue to give priority, and we'll keep the same policies in place for anybody that's rebuilding after this event, even if we're processing that permit, in a regular, along with regular business. So it's not like a status that you can lose.
Thank you. Thank you. Paul Violante, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
When do you get a contractor and a designer? I mean, first we have to go through and get the 4 clearances, to spend a bunch more money, to make my decision when and if I can afford to rebuild. And some of the questions look like you need a designer or something.
So you bring up a really great point. And on the question of spending a lot more money, that's actually, the converse is actually true. So the work that's going into these pre-clearances is work that would have to be done at some point on a property, no matter what. So the designer that you're engaging with, it may be out of sequence for him or her, but it's certainly all part of the process. So making sure you're not in a debris chute, absolutely, that's standard construction. Making sure your access for fire apparatus to get to you is in order, standard for building. Making sure your septic is sized appropriately for the structure that you're proposing, standard process. So
I'm planning to put back the exact same house that I have. It's a small little 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It's a rental of mine. But,
okay.
And I'm not worried about the septic tank because I just had a report done on that. It's more so I am in a debris flow parcel. So, you know, the geology study I think is most important. Probably going to make my mind up if I can proceed with a rebuild or not.
Sure.
So I don't know if I should get a designer now or just fill out all the apps and submit them.
So are you saying there's a possibility that you think, so being, I want to clarify for everyone, having your parcel be in a debris flow area doesn't mean that the 1,000, 2,000 square foot footprint of the house that you're talking about or the structure you're talking about is necessarily in that flow. So are you saying that you need to decide, if the house will be in a chute, or what mitigation measures would have to be done to mitigate that, and what that would cost prior to engaging with a building designer?
I think I'm concerned upon the requirements of a soil study and a geology study, is gonna help me make my decision.
Okay.
I would say that you don't necessarily have to have your designer on board and their work done in order to gain benefit from the clearance process. You just need to know the footprint, where you want it to go on the property. And you also know its size because you're rebuilding what you had. So that's plenty to get a read on what your geological requirements are going to be. And further, geologic clearances are free. They don't cost anything. So I would suggest you get started with somebody at the Recovery Permit Center and get started on your geology clearance, and that will give you the information you're looking for so you can make your other decisions. And you don't have to pay a designer at that, up to that point.
Yeah.
So just fill in the blanks on the geology report, submit it, and then the county takes it from there, or the 4-leaf or whatever.
Well, yes, and you don't even have to do that. You can call them or set an appointment, and they'll fill it out with you.
Okay. Very good.
Thanks, Paul. We're gonna take a pause from the hands raised and get to some questions in the chat. Melody has been monitoring those, and we've been trying to answer those, but there's a number of them in there, and we want to make sure to get to a few of those before we return to the hands raised. So, Melody, did you have some questions that you want to kind of summarize and pass to Mike or Paya or other folks?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start with the first one, and then I'll scroll down and group things as I see them. If a re-scrape is needed, as it seems with most properties, how long is the turnaround on that? So I believe this is in relation to debris removal.
Yeah, and I actually responded in the chat to that. Generally the re-scrape takes 1 to 2 days, and then we need to wait for the soil sample. So Cal OES gave us kind of a general 2-week turnaround, ideally, on re-scrapes. Hopefully that gets faster over time, but that was what they quoted us about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
There's a question on whether or not the moratorium on well work has lifted, and can people start working on repairing wells now?
I think,
I did answer that in the chat, but in case it's important to other people too, just to say, any work that you can do on the property, as long as, to not disturb where the ash footprint or the soil sampling has taken place, you can go ahead and do it. It's just that you're not supposed to disturb the area where either the debris removal will be occurring or it has occurred and you haven't gotten a clear.
Thank you, Marilyn. Did you want to keep reading, Melody?
Yeah, I'm going to keep going. So there was a question about whether the appointments with the Recovery Permit Center are done on Zoom, Mike, so.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I actually answered that in the chat as well. Those are going to be done via Microsoft Teams. And don't worry if you don't have experience with Teams, or you don't have it on your phone, etc. What happens is when you set the appointment, you will receive a link. Basically just says join now, and when your time comes to join, you just click the link and you're in a Teams meeting.
Question: if the debris removal crew buried our wellhead, do we need to drill a new well and get new permits for that?
I would get a professional out first to determine if that wellhead's recoverable.
I think that's for Brian. Yeah, get a professional out and look what happened to. Not only do you have, it sounds like soil on top, but you might have fire damage. So get a professional out there.
Okay. And then is soil testing done automatically by the county after the debris removal?
So again, soil sampling is part of the phase 2 state contractor process. And if you engaged in a private contractor, they were also required to do that. So it's nothing that you have to do separately. It's already part of the phase 2 process.
And people are just asking, where do those reports go? Do they go directly to you, Marilyn?
I do not get the soil sampling results. I get a report out saying that they have passed soil sampling for that particular gentleman. If somebody's interested in getting their soil sampling results, I'm certainly happy to ask, request those.
Okay. And someone is asking, can we put a temporary 20-foot shipping container on our land for temporary storage?
So that's one of those questions that I don't just want to say yes or no, because we don't know where they want to put it. So we don't know how big the property is. In a lot of cases, the answer is going to be yes. So whoever asked that, feel free to shoot me an email or give us a call. Or you probably don't want to set a whole appointment for that question, but we'll give you a ring and we'll figure out talk about your APN, where you want to place it, how long you want to place it for, what are we going to be doing with it, and go from there.
You can also send questions to the RPC at Santa Cruz County for questions like that we can respond over the email quickly.
Thanks, Mark.
So somebody's asking about increasing the house size and changing the location. And the question is, how does this square with previous information, primarily from environmental health, that in order to use the existing septic system, the house must be in the same footprint and cannot exceed the previous size by more than 10%?
So
there's kind of twofold.
Marcus, let me answer something else first before we do that. For folks that may be on the phone, I wanted to give that email out. So the RPC email is rpc@santacruzcounty.us. So Robert Paul Charlie, rpc@santacruzcounty.us for any questions. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So rebuilding with your same septic is first we have to verify the size to what was legally permitted. Within most cases, you have a 499 square foot buffer for environmental health, as far as there's no bedrooms added to it, and two habitable space. Moving the house relatively on, we all talk about footprint, but really there's that kind of developed area around your house where you had sidewalks, side yards and whatnot. That's the developed area that we're considering, and moving it around, twisting it around, and manipulating it in that factor is okay in most cases, as long as you're not pushing against the side of a cliff or embankment. But yeah, being able to, the 10% is really the limiting factor in coastal zones, and that's a whole other separate ball of wax that we could talk about. We're having a separate meeting that is specific to those type of questions in coastal zones.
And then there's a question, do you prefer that we contact the project planners, Chuck Tracy, with our questions, or call Mike and Marcus?
So
we
prefer, we prefer, number one, we prefer we make an appointment. But you know, your first line of defense here should be, yeah, give the center a call. They have the information right there. They can access the county's computers and systems. But if you can't reach anybody or after hours, anything like that, yeah, shoot myself or Marcus a phone call or text or what have you, and we'll make sure you get helped.
And there's a question about temporary power permits. Someone has indicated they've had one since mid-December, but they can't get PG&E to actually come out. So any suggestions that we can give on how to help somebody move PG&E along, or any context?
So if I'd ask back if they've had an inspection from the building department or RPC, and if the pole's been tagged. If that hasn't happened, on your permit card, there's a number to call and request an inspection. If that's already happened, please reach out to the RPC so we can resend anything back to PG&E to get them out there for them to light that pole back up.
PG&E definitely has some lag time, you can imagine, but mid-December, if we have inspected, that's too long. So. And
then how detailed a site plan is needed if rebuilding for the same footprint? Is existing county site plan recorded in 1989 when destroyed house was built good enough?
That should be good enough. The one thing we're going to need is a longitude and latitude of a corner of the house, if that's not already on the plan. But that can be done with a mobile device. And some of the package we kind of break down on an iPhone and on a tablet, or an iPhone or a Android, how to get that. We're looking for minimal information, a couple contours, the access and width, a scale of what the property is, and where some of the main features are, septic wells, and some of the sizings of that. And I'll put that in the chat so we can have a copy of kind of the complete list. But a 1980 approved one would get you pretty darn close.
In question on what is the difference between the PGHC paperwork and the environmental health clearance?
I can take that one. The PGHC is the geologic clearance, so that is going to cover and address geologic hazards. The environmental health clearance is going to look at septic, sanitation, and water. So they're covering two different subject areas.
And is the county requiring a geotech soil report, or is it up to the structural engineer to determine if they need one?
So that's a good discussion. There are some structures that are exempted from a soils report. I don't have the form in front of me. Generally speaking, when you're rebuilding your single-family house, a soils report is going to be required.
And there's a couple more things on PG&E, of course, about they've lost all the poles and the wires in the neighborhood, and people are worried about how they're going to get power, and folks filling out temporary permits. But PG&E mentioned that they would not supply temporary power in the White House Canyon area.
So Marcus and I, thankfully, through working on these other large-scale recovery efforts, we have some access to folks at PG&E that are more executive level, and we're going to be meeting actually with PG&E next week, and I hope we get some better answers, especially in areas like that where there's entire neighborhoods or areas that are without power. The answer of we're not supplying temp power doesn't make sense based on my experience. I'm not saying they didn't say that. I'm also not saying that PG&E is a pretty big animal, right? So you may talk to person A that may be a little less informed than person B. So we're going to try to get the very clear answers of what's the current turnaround time, what can folks expect, And as soon as we get that, also, I'm sure we'll post that information on the webpage as well.
And Paya, can you just clarify what PGHC acronym stands for?
Yes. Permanent Geologic Hazard Clearance.
Thank you. And then someone has indicated they've turned in a site plan and it's been accepted, and they're wondering when they can expect to hear about fire or environmental health clearances.
Depending on the address, I know a lot of them I'm waiting on. I'm sending our fire guy out this week. Kind of a consolidated effort. I know with the rains and stuff, he was having a hard time getting into a lot of places last week with the rains going on. But he should have them all. He should have his portions of them done this week.
Great.
And people are also asking about how they can get PG&E to underground wiring. I'm laughing because we've been through this in other areas of the county, and it's quite the process. So do we need to go to PG&E, or do we need to go through the county?
So as far as undergrounding goes, one thing that PG&E is really good at is giving you anything you want to pay for. So if you want your power underground on your property, PG&E will find a way to do it, but it generally comes with a pretty hefty price tag.
Yeah, there's a pole length, a length of undergrounding utility before a junction box is needed, and then you have to pull another length. So if you have a long distance to go, my neighbor undergrounded from the pole at my house to his place, and it was like 300 feet, and it was a big conduit that he needed and a bunch of hurdles. So if you got a long way to go, that might be cost prohibitive. But Mike's right. For the right price, PG&E will let you do almost anything.
Just about.
And question, how do we obtain a building permit if the only buildable area on the lot is in a debris flow path?
So this is going to be a group answer, I'm sure. Yes. But don't let that discourage you. Without looking at it, there's very likely mitigation measures that can be put in place to make that rebuild happen. So again, this is a great scenario for beginning of a pre-app meeting. I think Paya has something to add.
Yeah, that is very much going to depend on what the situation is, what the geologic circumstance is, what's the debris chute like, what's the debris flow like, all of that. So I think I agree with Mike. The thing to do is get started with a conversation, and we figure out what's the way to get some professional geologists up there to look at your situation so that you'll know what you're working with. And it might be started with a geologic clearance, or in your case, it might make sense to get a geologic hazard assessment, which is sort of the next level of investigation. So it basically needs to get looked at, and then we can know what to tell you and how to coach you.
The other thing I'll add just quickly for those folks who have concerns like this, and it was referenced in one of the early slides of the presentation, is that we will have a series of community meetings that do a deeper dive into some of these very specific geographic and geologic issues. So the debris flow basins are broken up by certain drainages, and so we will try to have neighborhood scale or issue scale meetings in the future to help do a deeper dive into some of these questions related to this. So please do stay tuned and sign up for the newsletter so that you can be made aware of those meetings. But definitely start the process and get more information from Mike, Marcus, and the team.
And then somebody says, we had a permitted house 1983. Is it possible that our road might be deemed not good enough by CAL FIRE now? The road is in much better shape now than it was in the 80s.
So that's a great phone call to make, to schedule one of our fire folks to come out and take a look. The fire code, like every other code, changes every few years. There's some basics we can always go back to where we talk about maybe your road's not in strict compliance, but does the fire district feel that certain alternate means or methods can be employed to say, yes, we can safely bring apparatus up there. You know, at the end of the day, the key is keeping lives safe, keeping those structures safe, and certainly not least is keeping the folks on that apparatus that are coming to help you safe. They don't want to get to the end of a road and figure out they can't turn their fire truck around. So short answer is give us a call and let's get one of our inspectors out there to take a look.
And question on whether the time frame for the further development of the limited density owner building rural dwelling option, and when we might be returning to the board for consideration on that.
Thank you for the question. I hope I get this right. There is a time frame that we're targeting. I believe we're trying to get to the board at the last meeting in March or the first meeting in April. So we expect to have a public meeting / workshop about that beforehand. And so that's what we're shooting for, is getting to the board around that time with a proposed ordinance.
And is there a firm requirement for solar implementation for these rebuilds, or is there any exceptions involved?
So the current building code does require solar, but there is exceptions for shading that reduce the required area. I don't know, Mike probably has a segue on that too.
No, that was pretty much where I was going to go. And also touching on that, just looking at the chat, fire sprinklers are also required for residential rebuilds. I will say, I mean, let me preface this. This is not the case right now in Santa Cruz County. However, the legislator did exempt solar from rebuilds in certain areas, certain to a prior cutoff date. So I believe it was January 1, 2020, 2019. It's one of those two. So in Sonoma County and Paradise, for example, there was an assembly bill put through that exempted those rebuilds from requiring solar. I'm sure that's being considered here in Santa Cruz. So I still encourage solar. It's a great thing, but I did want to let people know that in other areas, the state has looked at that and made the determination that it's not going to be required. And I'm sure your local elected officials are looking at that now.
And question on whether it's okay to get a Wi-Fi cable dropped when the temporary power is dropped. I'm wondering if the question is, do they need any other kind of permit for the Wi-Fi cable?
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then our neighborhood used to have quite a few fire roads leading in and out, and over the years, these were blocked off by building or other activities. Are there any plans to reopen and maintain these roads and keep an eye on them to make sure they remain usable so we don't see this happen again in a few years? Our neighborhood was probably written off long ago since there were no usable escape routes. And that's Carl Norden. Carl, I don't know if you are talking about a specific neighborhood, and I didn't see anyone from Public Works on the call, but there may be somebody here who can talk about roads.
So if we can just grab that question in email, we'll certainly make sure that goes to the right place. Okay. And we'll get an answer for you tomorrow.
Okay. And are manufactured or kit homes able to be placed on the property?
Absolutely.
And we have a partial loss due to smoke, soot, and heat damage. It's currently unlivable. Will be required to upgrade the electrical in the house to current county standards as part of our home repairs?
So any of the new work or integrated work would be required to be at the current code standards. That's going to be kind of a nimble setup between the contractor doing the work and where that kind of intertwines to that damaged area and where the undamaged area will meet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one to give us a call on or chat a little bit. Like if your house is full of old knob and tube wiring, running Romex and interlacing that can be a struggle, and a lot of contractors don't want to do it.
And then there's a question, what's the difference between the pre-application meeting screening and the pre-clearance?
So the pre-application screening is more of a conceptual meeting where we're just kind of shooting some ideas, giving you some information of kind of parameters to help you make decisions in your rebuild. The actual clearances is when we've had an actual, I want to build a house this big by this big and I want to put it here, and I have a site plan to confirm that and moving forward on that concept to get to the build, the rebuild submittal process.
Yeah, the pre-clearances are technical reviews. The pre-application conference can just be a conversation.
Can homeowners act as general for their own builds?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And sprinkler and water tank required? We already talked about solar, so.
Yeah, we touched real briefly on sprinkler. Sprinkler tank and hydrants required for all rebuilds.
Okay, and can any of the soil inspections or environmental health or fire inspections required for clearances be done before phase 2 is complete? I guess they mean phase 2 debris removal.
So I did answer that. And again, to reiterate, if you can do work on your property that is outside the footprint of where the foundation and the ash debris is, absolutely, you can go ahead and do it. You cannot just do work that would be within that footprint. Even if the debris was removed already, there's still soil sampling and other steps that have to be done. So you need to wait till the clearance is done to work within the footprint.
And there were some questions that came up about.
They're still there.
Sorry, there were some questions that came up around soils reports. So Mike, could you just repeat the information about soils reports and when they're required for new structures or when there's exemptions?
Sure. So we do have, there's certain exemptions in place for what we call, I guess the technical term is an accessory structure, garage, barn, different things of that nature that are exempted. Generally speaking, a single family dwelling that you're rebuilding is going to require a soils report. That's how your design professional knows how to design the foundation.
And question on whether a swimming pool would qualify for a water tank.
So that's a great question that'll be up to each individual fire district to determine. And good thing those gentlemen are on the line, gentlemen and ladies.
And generally the fire requirements around water tanks and hydrants is a flow rate at the hydrant. So you have to meet a certain flow rate. I believe it's 20 gallons per minute for 20 minutes or something like that. But it's just that's the critical piece. So it's not just the gallons capacity, but how quickly that capacity can be delivered to the hydrant. So depending on your site and where the pool might be relative to the hydrant in the home, that's the thing that the fire agencies are looking at.
There's some scenarios, David, as well, where, and for swimming pools, there are emergency situations where a helicopter will come bucket out of a swimming pool, or the fire folks can come out and draft. That in some areas is a lost art. I mean, some fire districts don't have the apparatus required to draft out of a pool. So collectively, the fire districts here have determined there's one regulation for the county, and it includes tanks and hydrants. That's the black and white of it.
And question on, so is a water tank required for fire sprinklers for each? We are on local water system, no wells. And that's Andy and Kathy, if you want to clarify that question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the scope of the question, Andy or Kathy. If you can clarify, or if you want to raise your hand and talk about the question, might be able to answer better.
Generally, I think it's that if the water pressure provided by the water service provider meets the hydrant or meets the flow rates required for the sprinkler system of the home. So depending on the size of the home and the number of sprinkler heads, there's a calculation that they do. And so there may be a capacity requirement that is calculated by the hydrant or the sprinkler installer to know whether or not that question can be answered.
So that could be, I kind of hate to speculate, but generally speaking, so just so everyone on the line understands, residential fire sprinklers are not designed, they're not made for, they're not to save your home in case of a fire. The bottom line is they're to give you enough time to get out of your house if there's an internal combustion. So the actual requirement for water usage, even on a 2,000 square foot house, is minimal. I don't have the math in front of me, but it's, what does it come to, about 300 or 400 gallons, Marcus, maybe, for something like that? And that's not exact. That's, the tanks are also there for suppression water. So we're kind of mixing two different animals. And I know the fire folks are online. I hope I'm not butchering that too bad. I don't want them to be angry at me.
All right, I'm going to go one more question in the chat, and then we'll go back to the people raising their hands. I was taxed on a cabin and main house that burnt. Do I rebuild one at a time, or do I submit site maps, etc., for both at the same time?
Marcus is muted, so I'll talk for him. So you can do either. You can come in one at a time. You can put both structures on the same parcel and submit. What I'm hesitant on there, and this is another reason why we have the pre-app meetings, and this may be relevant to a lot of folks. Simply stating you were taxed on something, that could have been a legal structure, could have been illegal, or unpermitted rather. The assessor will tax you on anything they can see. So let's come in and make sure those are good to go structures. And if they are, it's up to you. It's oftentimes more cost effective to submit on one plan set, and we'll give you two separate permit numbers for the two separate structures.
And let's go back to people who've raised their hands.
All right, so I'm gonna go out of order just for a second because I know everybody's been on for a while, and before everybody get off, I do want to give Hallie Green, she's a fire victim but also a member of the United Policyholders, a chance if she has a question or something to share for resources for folks. So Hallie, would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and if you have a question for the group or just to share some information?
Yay, great. Thank you so much for the intro. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. We met, really briefly, the 4-leaf team out at Bear Creek, and I'm really happy you guys are on this project, and I think you're doing a great job. I know there's a lot of things to clarify, and we all have a really different rebuild process going on, and so I just want to acknowledge that you guys are doing a great job, in the county as well. I wanted to make sure that people knew about United Policyholders. They've helped me personally quite a bit in reaching out, to my insurance agent, adjuster, and different information. We have some really good webinars coming up in March. One is going to be concerning rebuild, versus, rebuild versus, what's the other option, you guys? I'm blanking on the word right now. Versus paying out. Thank you. And that one I'm really interested in because I think it really helps you, navigate paying off your mortgage or not, or a lot of things that people are bringing up and talking about. So I just encourage you to follow them. A lot of their information is going to be available, through these emails as well from the county. But it's United Policyholders, or up.org. And then myself, I had just a question, don't want to take up too much time, but I've had a lot of community reaching out about whether or not it would be cost effective or of benefit for there to be, sample plans or an approved plan that either the county or 4-leaf had something, a little collective that might be a cost savings. I don't know if that's something to bring up here, but I did have a few people mention that to me, so I thought I'd just bring it as a question here if possible.
We do have a segment of local design professionals that are interested in providing, I guess what we call them in the industry as stock plans.
Okay.
So the plan itself has been cleared for building code requirements. We know it's pretty much good to go. The only caveat is when it goes on each individual lot and the orientation of that lot, it can change the energy code requirements. So that would be kind of a separate thing. But that was done in Sonoma. It was attempted in Paradise. There just wasn't the right amount of interest. And I'm glad you bring that up for another reason. And I'm going to segue, but I think it's an important segue. Be very, very leery of the plans you can purchase online that may be drawn in Arizona by someone with an Arizona engineering license, because then you pay for those. And I'm saying Arizona, I'm saying anywhere out of California. And sometimes even to make it more convoluted, California itself has different seismic zones and different seismic risk areas. So be careful of buying plans on the internet. We saw a lot of folks do that early on in Sonoma and Paradise, and they paid the bulk for those plans. Then they had to pay a local design professional to rework them for those specific zones. So be really careful there. But there is some interest. I'm actually engaging with someone that Paya had connected us, a local architect, and he's speaking for sort of a collective. And hopefully there's some great little stock plans we can put together, and the economy of scale can work out.
If you could email me, I will put you in contact with a gentleman in Paradise that's doing the same thing. They created a foundation to build a library for stock plans, and it's working well. There's a couple different sizes, but it's not a fit for everyone. But it does help with the preparation of plans. That cost, it takes it down to pretty much nothing. If you can get the designers and the legalese right. But yeah, send me an email. I'll hook you up with that gentleman, and he can kind of go over how they've done it.
Okay, thank you guys for your time.
Thanks. Lonnie, why don't we, Lonnie, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I didn't actually raise my hand. Sorry, I have my dog in here.
Okay, all right.
Looked like I was raising my hand, but this has been great, and thank you for doing this. It's really helpful.
All right. Actually, Lonnie, you were a different Lonnie, but there's Lonnie Deutsch, maybe, that had their hand raised, but thank you. No, we'll give them a second. Maybe we'll circle back. Catherine Wilson, you had your hand raised again.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
I'm the person who asked the PG&E question. What 22? I'm in the Boulder Brook neighborhood, and 22 homes were lost there, and it burned down all the power poles and all the wiring. And then the water company came through and pulled up all the water lines. So I'm going to try and put a temporary structure up there, but what are we looking for in a time frame of getting the infrastructure back in terms of power and water?
So that would be, again, a really great email. I think maybe I didn't mention, maybe I just thought about it. We are going to be meeting with PG&E next week on some level, and that can be something that we can attempt to figure out for you. And then on the water district side, do you know who the water district is, or if it's an active district?
San Lorenzo Valley Water. And I did talk to them after I saw them pulling up all the lines, and they basically said, when you're ready to rebuild, just give us a call and we'll hook you up. So hopefully that will be able to happen. I know they're very stressed in terms of time and money. So.
Well, I do know San Lorenzo Water District, definitely one of the larger, more ready to go type districts. So barring any other reason, I would take them on their word.
Yeah, at least get the meter back and go from there. All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lonnie Deutsch, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Okay, we'll go on to Robin Hilliard again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a house. It's on Last Chance. I built it in 1976 with a permit. It's a rather large building. I'm going to scale it way down. I'm going to use the footings. Am I still going to have to go through all the geological, the soils and everything else to get a permit? I'm not going to move it. It's going to be in the same footings that are here.
I think, Mike, I think just before you get into, there are going to be some conversations and some discussion, and Rob and maybe Paya wants to talk a little bit about what is being looked at for this, for that your community, the Last Chance community specifically. I think it's such a nuanced and very specific area that it might be best to take this conversation offline, and we can discuss it in an email setting with you or the group, or have a separate meeting with the residents out there at Last Chance. But there's certainly different considerations being given the nature of construction that was originally done out there. And Paya, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, that is all true, David. And also, I think Robin raised a couple of questions there that are somewhat general and might be helpful for people to hear. And one of them has to do with reusing your foundation. So I think I'll let Mike, as the building person, respond to that, because I think a lot of people have that question. And you know, there's a process to check out whether that's going to be possible or not. You know, but I also know that many times it's not ultimately possible. So, Mike, can you speak to that, or Marcus?
Sure. So the issue of foundation reuse has come up everywhere we've been. There's certain scenarios where, and I'll try to be as concise as possible, but if you, for example, are in the public cleanup, the ROE program, your foundation is likely not going to be there after they scrape. There's some scenarios where people they've successfully, been on site when the team was there. They've asked them to leave a foundation. That's really not protocol, and I wouldn't bank on that in any way. So in scenarios where, then there's a couple other scenarios. There's foundation systems that are pier and grade beam. So for folks maybe unfamiliar with the construction process, pier and beam is a lot of times there's a deep hole dug numerous times. Concrete is poured in that silo, and then there's grade beams, they call it, placed on top of those. In those cases, a lot of times the grade beams can be removed, but the structure that is sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 feet underground is intact, and you're able to replace just the grade beams. The third sort of scenario is maybe you had a slab foundation and footing. You can engage with a design professional, a registered, licensed California engineer, to go out and test that foundation through minimal destructive testing, non-destructive testing. We have a great handout on it. We've found that a lot of times it doesn't work because the folks rebuilding may not want the same layout, same structure. And B, there's certain scenarios where that concrete can get so hot, it'll actually spall. So if you hit it, a lot of indicators of this is concrete that looks almost pink. Go up and hit it with a hammer and it'll just start sharding off and dusting off. And that's a pretty layman indicator that foundation can't hold the bearing capacity anymore needed to support a house. But
maybe I should reiterate footings. I'm going to take out the foundation walls.
So let me jump in real quick. I apologize to cut you off. I'm not talking specifically about your home. I think Paya and David were saying your situation is very nuanced and different, based on being in the last chance community. I was saying that more for, I think we have about 120 people on the line, so I'm giving a general overview of foundation reuse. So I wasn't shutting your foundation reuse down, or it wasn't that I wasn't listening to your question.
Okay. So the question was, if I use the existing footings, taking the foundation out, I'm using the existing footings that have been there since 1976. Do I still have to go through all the geological soils and everything else?
Right. So I think David answered that. I think David, maybe can you?
I think our best bet.
I
think our best bet, Robin, because you have some really great but very technically specific to your site questions, is to start that conversation with the RPC to explore some of your options, and then certainly stay tuned as we have more meetings that specifically address rebuilding in your neighborhood. So I think it's hard to give you all of the answers that you have, which all of them are great questions, but they are very specific, and that's why Mike is trying to be as broad in his answer as possible, is to cover information that will be valuable to everybody. But I know I want to get to as many people as we can, Robin, so I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to just try and get to the rest of the hands raised right now.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Doug.
Hi, this is Lonnie Deutsch.
Lonnie, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, my primary question is about geology or geotechnical, but there's a couple of things that were said that I'd like to ask for clarification, and hopefully they'll be quick. One of the comments was that if you had plans from 1989, that those plans would be, pretty close to acceptable. But my understanding is that the foundation requirements are different, that the siding requirements are different.
Let me jump in, Lonnie. Let me jump in. I think you may have been cut off and possibly you only heard a portion of the question. That question was specific to the site plan, not the building plans.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Does that help?
Yeah, I misunderstood the response.
Okay.
Question. And then it was also discussed a rebuild time would be about 3 years. 3 years starting from when?
It's not a timeline, like there's not a deadline for you to rebuild by. I think that Paya tried to articulate that the team, Mike and his team, are going to be around for a considerable length of time, but they may not be here for the duration. But your opportunity to rebuild is not predicated on being done in the next 3 years. We're just saying there's an arc, and a lot of people are able to go through the process and begin the rebuilding in the first 3 years. But that there's not a time limit. The same process and the same review prioritization will be present if you're outside of that window.
All right. I've heard that 3 year time period thrown out before, and I just was trying to understand it better.
Sure. And I do, you had mentioned something, Lonnie, and I want to it's always good to hear it from a couple different perspectives. You have the geologic report and a geotechnical report. And as Mike said, the geotechnical report is determining the soil bearing capacity for the foundation design or retaining wall design that you might need on your property. And then the geologic report is evaluating potential hazards, landslides, debris flows, faults, things of that nature. So those are the two reports. I know they are technical in nature. And I just wanted you were not sure what the distinction was. I wanted to just reiterate that. Mike has said that a couple times tonight. It's always good to hear it a couple different times.
Yeah, I was picking up on the soils, but not equating that to geotechnical. So my primary question is more of stating a concern. I've contracted with an architect and a structural engineer, and right now they've been contacting county officials that are taking a look at erosion control, and the geological concerns. And the concern I have is that, it sounds like there's a potential that, I may need to do some sort of elaborate retaining walls. Now, I never had that in the past and never really had a flow issue. But, if there's a requirement for like, an elaborate diversion system and retaining wall, my concern is that's going to take up the funds available for rebuilding the house and could cause a situation to go from I got maybe just enough finances to rebuild to I can't rebuild now because of these requirements for, a retaining wall or the geological concerns. Is there any, I was wondering if you could.
I think before Mike answers, I want to blow the question out a little bit so people kind of understand what he's talking about, and then maybe Mike, you can give an answer. So there are requirements around retaining the stormwater that's generated from the impervious surfaces on a property on site. And so I think that's what you're talking about, Lonnie, and maybe Mike, you can talk a little bit about that that process and give some clarity there. But I think that's what you're referring to, Lonnie, is there are, for roads, surfaces, and roofs and whatnot, you're not allowed to just shove that in a pipe and drop it off the side of your property.
Well, yeah, I don't understand exactly what is being required, but I'm getting the impression from talking with the folks that I'm working with that the requirements have become, more onerous, and that where I wasn't required to have, for an example, a retaining wall in the past, now I would be required to have a retaining wall. And yeah, my concern is that'll be a deal breaker in the amount of funds available to rebuild the house.
I think I can respond to that. Yeah, I think he's not so much talking about retaining water as retaining walls, and the retaining walls being required for some geotechnical or geologic purpose. And I totally understand the concern, because I think what you're describing, it can happen. So if even if you're rebuilding in the same place and not increasing anything, and we're not coming in and applying, some new rules or modern rules to that, there is always kind of a basic health and safety standard that has to be met before a building permit can be given. And that's just, basic life safety. And so I think the path here is working with your geologist to understand exactly what's required, and is it required in order to meet that basic level of building site safety. And if it is, then we have to help you figure out how to accommodate that. So it's not a matter of, now it's 20 years later and there's all this new stuff going on. It's that that basic standard needs to be met, regardless. And if it were a new house, there would be more stuff. But this is just to replace. But yet, if you've got a geologist saying you've got a debris flow hazard and you've got to have a diversion wall, we're going to have to grapple with that. And we'll help you.
Okay, well, yeah, because, I was coming from a position of, there was talk about grandfathering some of the requirements so that, people would be able to rebuild. And so I thought, probably we'll be able to make it work. But as there's been more discussion about, increasing those kind of requirements, it makes me concerned that there just won't be enough funds to rebuild. And so it's quite the concern, because I would prefer to rebuild.
Yeah, I totally get it. This is the trickiest situation, I think, that we're all going to be grappling with.
So during your engagement with, I don't know who, what designers you have, or design professionals, or if you have a geologist. I didn't hear you say that.
No, it's like the architect and a structural engineering, contacting the county folks that do that. I don't know if they're geologists or what, but they're getting feedback from the county that there may be some additional requirements and just additional structures like a retaining wall potentially.
So what I would suggest, Lonnie, sorry I call you Mr. Deutsch, but I don't know if that's the correct word.
Yeah, you said it correct. Good
All
job.
right, good. Not the greatest speller. You're a great candidate. Like I've said, I'm gonna say this till I'm blue in the face, and everyone says, I wish Mike would shut up about these pre-application meetings. Grab your architect, your engineer that you're already paying to due diligence, and I know we all have demands, we all have work demands. This, whatever time frame works for you. Let's sit down for a few minutes. I think we can probably dig into this in maybe 30 minutes with our staff and understand what's really going on your property. So you're not just hearing it from the design professionals that are working for you. You're hearing it directly from the horse's mouth, so the county. I'd really recommend that you set a quick appointment with us. Talk to Marcus or Chuck or Tracy or me, and we'll dig into your property, and collectively we'll figure out how to. I want to get everybody back in their homes, and I want to do it safely. So, and I want to do it quickly. So I just, I don't have your APN at a swipe right now. I can't dig into your property. If I could, I'd take this offline and do it now. But if you want to follow up with an appointment and we can talk a little more, I think that's the way to do it.
All right, yeah, read you loud and clear. That's what I was planning on doing based on your previous comments. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Lonnie, and sorry I misunderstood, but I appreciate Mike and Paya chiming in. Doug, why don't we go to you? Doug, you raised your hand if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question. Doug. We can also go to Lee Otter.
Hi there, everybody. We're at 260 Braemore in the Bonnie Doon area, and we're planning on rebuilding. My question's about trees. We have lots of piles of cut logs laying on our property. I think the ones that PG&E probably took down, and they're in the way of where we might want to put a temporary trailer or enhanced septic system, and no one has come to pick them up, even though that's been requested. So I was wondering if you had any information on what's going to happen with those. And also, there's still a lot of burnt large trees that are dead, and anywhere we rebuild the house, they could fall on the house. Are those going to be taken care of, and if so, how?
I can try and take that for you. There's two questions there. The first question is related to the hazardous trees in the building envelope. So if your existing building envelope, those trees are in it and they're a threat to falling on the people that are clearing your site as part of the clearing, they will remove those trees. So hazardous trees that would threaten falling onto the folks clearing phase 2 will be removed as part of phase 2 cleanup. If they're outside of that envelope, then that would fall on the responsibility of you, the property owner, to remove those trees, especially if you decide to move the envelope into different locations. And then the update for everybody on the PG&E trees. So it sounds like your pile of trees is what we're unfortunately calling the PG&E trees. There's over 10,000 of them in the burn area. We are working closely to try and see if we can find a local resource to take them for milling at no cost to the county or to the property owner. We are exploring legal options with PG&E as well. We're hoping that PG&E steps forward and takes care of the removal of those trees. So we're actively working on that, Lee. And I know it's an issue not foreign to many on this call. So I appreciate you bringing it up so that we had a chance to give everybody an update on that. And we will definitely keep folks posted on the progress on trying to get PG&E to clean up the trees that they cut down.
Thank you.
We'll try Doug again. Doug. And if Doug, we got Joe. Joe, your hand is raised. Joe.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got property in Big Basin, actually in Boulder Creek. And first of all, I was wondering, there was a permitted barn with power for a water pump, and I'm wondering if that utility would be replaced and that if I can rebuild the barn.
Mike, do you want to take that?
Sure, yeah. I'm just trying to understand on when you ask if
it was a permitted barn back in, oh boy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand.
84, 82.
Okay. So I was just trying to understand when you said, will the utility be replaced?
Well, it has a power, there was a power pole there.
Sure.
With the barn.
Yeah, so the utility 90, so without knowing your property, and I'm taking what you said as gospel here, so 99.999%, yeah, you can get your temporary power or your permanent power attached to that barn. There's an order of operations. Was there a house on the property as well, or?
It was unpermitted. It was added on to the barn.
Okay. You are a great candidate to come in and talk to us as well. So
I noticed that you had something, if it was grandfathered, I think before 84 or 85, I forget which.
86. 86 is a number that's floating around.
Yeah, it was prior to that. So
it's real likely you can rebuild that barn. We need to. That's one we need to look at your APN and make sure we can help you get on the right path. I know we can. It's just, are there going to be any hoops to jump through, or?
Oh, and I'm used to jumping through hoops. I lost both properties, and the lower one, I was in a 5-year process to get that one permitted, and of course, once the fire came, that went up in smoke. But I had another question regarding debris removal.
Sure.
Are we notified prior to the removal team arriving?
Generally not.
Oh, okay. Huh. All right.
And that's not just here, that's experienced throughout the state. Generally not. You can request it. But what happens is Cal OES kind of runs the program. And then there's, obviously subcontractors and haulers that are doing the actual work.
Right.
And I'll just be frank with you, they want to get in and out. They don't want to necessarily interface with the property owner, unfortunately.
I can imagine. Can retaining walls remain? Is this something where it almost requires an interface?
So is it a retaining wall or is it like a site wall? Is it
retaining?
retaining?
Well, it's a retaining wall, but it was bearing part of bearing the structure.
It's likely that'll be removed during the process.
Really, even if it's 5 feet tall.
And again, I'm just speaking from experience, and I'm speaking from talking to thousands of people that unfortunately have had this,
yeah,
this
because
issue.
it would really mess up the site. That's.
Yeah. I mean, you can spray paint on it. Please leave.
No, that was my next question. Can I spray paint?
Yeah, it's your wall. Yeah, you sure can.
All right, very good. Well, that was, if I'm not notified, at least I'll spray paint it, photograph it, and if I have to pursue action after that, I can.
Yes, yeah, I know that's not the best answer, but we want to give you the honest answers. So
sure, no, I appreciate your being candid. There was one other quick thing here. Oh, how much typically is the debris removal? Or I know it's probably a range.
How big is your property?
The structure was, lower one was about 2,700 square feet, and the upper one about 2,000.
So I can't speak specifically for Santa Cruz. We haven't seen, obviously those bills haven't come in. Generally, the public process, the public program in Sonoma County, we saw costs range from $10,000 all the way up to $100,000. It was depending on the property. However, if your insurance can't cover that, you're not on the hook for those monies. You don't have to come out of pocket for those monies. I want everyone to really understand that.
No, on one of the properties, it was uninsured. It was a complete loss. And the other one, they didn't specify the amount. I don't know if it's covered or not. I mean, I think they said that the price was included in the money that they returned for the structure. Does it have to be a specified amount?
So it will be a specified amount. So there will be bills that come in, likely not tomorrow. It's going to be well after the debris program is finished. There's going to be bills that come in from OES on individual properties, and they take the time, material, the cost, and they'll bill to that property.
I see.
And Dave, I'm assuming your office is going to kind of facilitate that when it comes time, right?
Yeah, there'll be a coordination for those who have insurance that would have covered a portion of the debris removal. The state requires us to secure those funds from your insurer. If you did not have any insurance, or your insurance did not cover the removal and you were part of the public process, then there would be no charge to you, the property owner.
The insurance company, it did not specify any amount for.
So in your insurance rider, there's no amount specified for debris removal, is what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Most insurance policies will not have that written in. So,
and that's where I recommend you talking with the United policyholders folks. So they're an insurance. They're going to help you navigate the insurance piece. Marilyn might actually also, she raised her hand, have a little bit more to add.
What happened? My understanding is for those policies where there's not a specific debris removal or environmental contamination clause and part put out, then if you rebuild and there's actually money left over after your insurance, from your insurance, then that can be some of the money they go after. So if your cost of your rebuild is more than the cost of your insurance coverage, there's nothing left to go collect.
I see. Yeah. How about if you don't rebuild?
So you can, my understanding, if you repurchase somewhere else, you can apply that, again, the purchase from somewhere else to that. And if the last I heard, and I pushed OES a little bit on this, is if you don't rebuild, then yes, they can go after the cost of the debris removal.
I see. And who is it that this is a federal or a state agency that goes after you?
Well, no, it's not that they're going after it. The whole point is you had insurance that covered this, right? Correct. And so rather than the government paying for your debris removal, when you had paid an insurance company to do it for it, that was the part of the coverage. Mm-hmm. They're going to ask that for that insurance coverage. It's just, they're not going to pay for something that the insurance company already is paying for.
So let me ask you this, Marilyn, then if I'm on site when they're doing the removal and I say, do not remove footings because I am sure that's expensive to do. If they just get rid of whatever toxic materials are there, ash and so forth, then is that all right with the county?
The people that you want to talk to are the folks that are out there on the property. They determine what can be, it's not up to us really, to be honest with you. The county merely asked OES. We said we cannot afford to do this ourselves as a county. We need the assistance of the state and the federal government. And so they are now in charge of that project.
Okay. Joe, I know we're going a little long. What I'd love for you to do is email me My name is David Reed, R-E-I-D. So it's david.reed, R-E-I-D, at santacruzcounty.us. And we'll see if we can get some of your questions answered. I want to get to Martin real quick, who has their hand raised.
I appreciate what you guys do.
Absolutely, Joe. I want to get to Martin, and then we just have a couple more chat questions for folks. Martin.
Hey guys, thanks for staying a little bit later. My question is similar to Lonnie's, whereas we're looking to rebuild, there's a lot of risk reward, and we're really unsure. I really feel like I'm out of my element whenever we talk about construction and other things. I guess my main question that could benefit everybody would be, if I know the county is doing some things for people to rebuild their house, if I decide to opt out because I feel like I'm way over my head, and another contractor were to buy my particular lot, would whatever benefits that the county is giving to help rebuild, will those transfer over, or are those to the person who owns the property at the time of the disaster?
Follows the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I think Melody had a couple last questions from the chat, and then we'll try and end this evening's conversation. Melody?
Yeah, there's a question here about, can you rebuild with spring water, or does it have to be with a well?
Spring, I believe, can still qualify as potable if it's tested. That wouldn't give you, likely couldn't give you the flow required for your fire sprinkler system, but your tank certainly could. There's unless Maryland has a differing opinion that that's not potable.
As long as it has the amount of water that you need to, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, the rate to feed your home. But
Right.
again, I think you're going back to, that's really, I'm really looking more narrowly at potable water and the needs of a home. But again, if you need issues for fire suppression, that would be a different topic.
Yeah, that's a good discussion to have. I would shoot an email to Marcus or myself, and we'll contact you directly.
Then, is there a simplified code book that ordinary people can understand to give us an idea of what kind of house we can build, including tiny homes? Don't we wish?
So, believe it or not, the company DeWalt, who I don't know if everyone's familiar with, they're a power tool company and probably do some other things. They make a building code book. I believe it's called, Marcus, if you hear, I think it's Building Code Illustrated.
Yeah, Building Code Illustrated.
There are a couple books that really help folks understand the building code. So if people are interested in that, you can certainly give us a ring, shoot us an email, and we can send you links to those reference materials.
Any other questions, Melody?
Yes, one more. When will the option to pay the temporary housing permit fee be available?
The option to pay. Can you read that again?
When will the option to pay the temporary housing permit fee be available?
Temporary housing permits are available now, so I'm not sure.
See, you'd have to make application through the temporary housing permit process, and it's $327 and I think $83. $327 for the temp, so the temp housing, and then the 83 for the environmental health, or the 183 is about for the environmental health clearance, and then we waive the temp power if you want a temp power in that process.
And then the one other thing to add to that, right, is that you have to be through the debris clearance, the phase 2 process, before that permit will be issued.
And
I think we said that is true in general, but that on a case-by-case basis, it may be issued prior, because if you've got, a giant property and you're going to be far away from the rebuild site, there's possibility that would be just fine.
And Paya, is it available for people to pay those fees online?
Correct. After you make submittal, we create a permit for you, and then we'll send you a link to pay online specific to that, your property and that permit.
Okay, so nobody has to actually come into the county building. They're asking for what site do you go to pay the fees? So nobody has to physically come in anywhere. They can do it all online. Okay. And what is the continuing process for receiving the temporary housing permit fee after submitting the application?
Continuing process for I think I may understand the question. So the process to receive the actual permit, once everything's cleared and paid, you receive the permit. So there's no continuing process post that. I believe the permit's good for 3 years.
Correct.
So if you're talking post 3 years, that would be a separate conversation.
And just to be clear, or to be complete, temporary housing permits also need a temporary geo clearance. So I think the thing to do is to get with the RPC, and they'll hook you up with the process and take you through getting the temporary housing permit.
Okay, everybody, that's really the last of the questions in the chat. Dave, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just a couple things. One, we really do want to encourage everybody to connect with the Recovery Permit Center. As you can see, Mike and Marcus are dedicated to supporting everybody. We want to make sure that you do pull a permit when you go back to temporarily occupy your home, because that is one of the ways in which we will know that people are living on the property should we need to evacuate you under circumstances like we did a week and a half ago with the debris flow. So it helps us know who has returned to their properties for those people who have pulled permits. And then I also wanted to reiterate that there are resources out there to help both with understanding your insurance process. There are resources to help you with the emotional components of this rebuild. Please sign up for that newsletter, and stay connected to us so that we can help you all the way through this process.
All right, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. We're going to have another town hall on Thursday at 5:30. That one will be primarily for those in Supervisor Coonerty's district, and we'll deal with some of the special issues related to being in the coastal zone, because there are some additional concerns for rebuilding in the coastal zone that we will probably talk about. And we will, as I said, we recorded this, so we will take the recording and the slides and post them on the fire recovery website under the events section. You'll see a section that says previous events, and then we'll post them. It always takes a little while for ISD to do what they need to do to the recordings to make them accessible to everybody. So it probably won't be posted right away. Give us a few days to do that. And they'll probably post them after the Thursday meeting so we can do them both together. So they may not get posted until early next week. I, again, thank you all for coming. Thank you to all the presenters, Mike, Marcus, Paya, Marilyn Underwood. Thanks to Dave Reed for co-facilitating. We wish you the very best with your process, and please remember, everybody is here to help you get back onto your property and living in your home as rapidly as we possibly can. So, so be aware to use the resources that are here, because we really are on your side, and we want you to go back to living your life the way it was before the fire. Thank you very much, everybody.